No.
That's good. Yeah, sounds full to me.
Sounds good. Are we ready to get started?
Man, what time is it?
I've got 15:40.
He's in the back. He's giving a thumbs up. What do you think? Yep, he got
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm pretending like reading slides here. It's Leadership Roundtable. Just seeing what we're doing. Yeah, so let me be the one to welcome you here. I appreciate you coming in. Appreciate you coming to listen. Something that we were asked to do a roundtable, and it's always fun for me to moderate because I'll moderate for a little bit, then I get involved in the discussion. I only pretend to moderate at the beginning. But it's always fun to have people come in from other places with new ideas or different ideas to talk fire stuff. And, this conference means so much to me, and I know it means as much to Joe. And many of the faces I see in the crowd means just as much because you come here and you get rejuvenated. You come here and you get recharged. You come here to give back to your community, and this is where you get your batteries fixed, is my opinion. And what I'm hoping you get out of today is some type of takeaway, because we're going to be talking about change. And we've been talking about change in the fire service from the moment I walked in it. And it's, whether it's strategy and tactics, changing those, different things with personnel, changing the way you handle that, different dynamics with who we are, what we do, and changing those things. And the big conversation has been culture. And I think all of that can kind of fall in that culture thing. And, both of our speakers here today, in their presentations, talked about change. So it just kind of falls right into what we want to talk about today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to just go down the line and allow you to introduce yourself, because I didn't memorize your bios, and nor do I like doing that. So
he's trying to. He can't remember that well, so I mean, it wouldn't work.
You tell your own bio, tell your own story. Tell the truth, don't tell the truth, doesn't matter to me. I'm Will Vinay. I'm retired Deputy Chief of Ladies Island St. Helena Fire District, past President Association, and from time to time they allow me to moderate and do a podcast with Mr. Joe Palmer. I will now pass it off to you.
All right, Dan Shaw, retired Ops Chief out of Fairfax County, just retired in July of last year, just shy of 30 years. Spent most of my time doing some consulting and teaching, and serve as a technical editor for Fire Engineering Magazine.
Awesome.
I'm Sarah Janke. Is that on? Ooh.
Whoa.
Oh, it is.
Hello. I'm Sarah Janke, and I direct the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research. I am not a firefighter. I'm just a scientist. But I've been doing research on firefighter health for almost 20 years now, and I'm pretty much obsessed with the topic.
I'm Joe Palmer. I don't know what I've done, what the world. I've been hanging around for a while, and they let me keep hanging around for a little bit longer. I tell you, here's a great introduction. Here's the perfect way to put it. You said this morning that he was M&M's, and you're the raisins.
Raisins.
So that means that we must be peanuts, man. So that we're the ones that part of this mix that nobody wants. You throw the peanuts away, So, or the nuts part would be very appropriate. But I appreciate you allowing me to be here. I used to work for you guys as executive director for a whole bunch of years, and they let me retire and come back and retire and come back and retire and come back. So now I'm just retired again. So thank you, and appreciate you being in the room with us.
Yeah, like I said, we're just going to share ideas. I don't have a format other than we're just going to have a conversation, and it's going to be loosely related to change. And as I told Dan earlier, that no matter what rabbit hole this thing goes down, we just chase it. Doesn't matter to me. But Joe, I will start because, so there's change that we do kind of optional, and then there's change that's kind of going to be more or less forced upon us. And you have been on the forefront, not just for South Carolina, but for the nation, following the changes that most likely for OSHA. And those are OSHA mandates or rules that we're going to have to follow that is going to force the fire service to potentially change in different areas. So if you could talk just a little bit on that and some of those things that could be something we're looking at and going to be doing. And I know you've been talking about a lot, but if you would just share that now.
You kind of summed it up. Change is something just we've dealt with. It's a nonstop thing. If you're not changing, you're not growing. If you're not changing, you're really dying. And we all experience that constantly, but one of the things that has not changed for us, and you heard from me say and others this morning, that one of the governing documents that we have used and laid our head on at night and talked about hadn't changed in 40 years. Now, show me anything else in your department that hadn't changed in 40 years. It's rare. It's odd if it stays that long. Technology, other standards that need to be referenced, common sense things we do, things that have been adopted because of national tragedies. And none of that is in a current existing regulation that we reference in South Carolina, our training material, our physicals that we fill out in a thing of doctor signs, on and on and on and on. And it hasn't changed in 40 years, and that's not fair. And there have been a very diligent group of individuals and organizations that have worked on rectifying that situation for 17 years, on and off again kind of thing, but collectively 17 years, and presented that document. And if you had the good fortune of hearing our speakers this morning, both of them in direct and indirect ways, really talked about the necessity for the things in that document that need to change. Now, as we go through conversation, and I'm not going to dominate, I'll kick it back to you kind of thing, but we can talk about the application of that for us specifically, South Carolina. That's a whole nother thing. But fundamentally, we have a great opportunity to, I'll call it, modernize what we do as a fire service in one of the regulations that governs our lives.
So, had a conversation in the hallway, me and you did, and I kind of mentioned that as a fire department, a fire service, or a firefighter, and really just a human being, there needs to be some type of evolution. And that's who we need to be. You need to always be evolving. And where that goes, I'm not always sure, but if you're always working to go somewhere and be something more or different, seems to be a whole lot more successful. And you don't have to get to a point where somebody throws down the gauntlet, we need to change, because you're always evolving. But you talked this morning about being a fearless leader. If you could, just some of your thoughts on obstacles on change in general. Why do we fight it so damn much?
Yeah, and I think this OSHA document is a perfect example, almost case study. I would offer to the room, like, how many of you in this room were solicited for your impact before you saw that statement? Probably none, right? What we don't like is where change is forced upon us and we don't feel like we're part of the process. And that's the key to changes, especially like when someone gets promoted, there's an instant thought process that me being promoted is a call to action for change. Like, I'm getting moved to this role, I'm an officer, now I need to go change things. And it's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make, is that if you know change is going to happen. I mean, I think any leader embraces that fact that change is going to happen no matter what. Whether you like it or not, it's going to occur. Now, it's just a matter of how it occurs and how you implement it. So for a leader, why I say OSHA document is a great case study is because if you take the time to sit on your hands and do nothing but listen, you might find that the change is much easier to implement. So for instance, if I went into a battalion, I get promoted to battalion chief, and I think I have to go change things because I'm the new guy or girl on the street, and I have to go do these changes. And all the changes you wanted to do are all the ideas that the people who worked in that battalion wanted to do anyway. But it's different because you didn't ask them any input. You showed up as a new person who was not part of that tribe and changed everything. But if you took a different course and said, hey, for the first 30, 60 days, I want to come by and talk to you. What do you think we should be doing we're not doing? And you tell me all these things. And I don't really do anything more than listen, but I know what you're saying is exactly what I want to do. And then 120 days later, I implement all the changes, the 3 you told me. What's the outcome?
Should be positive.
Yeah, you feel empowered. You feel like I talked to leadership took my ideas and implemented that change. I will embrace that change. But if I jam it down your throat without any input, man, what do you need me for? You're just going to change anything anyway. So it's a matter of just having that patience and temperance to be able to say, you know what, let me just talk to the people I have to lead. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I heard it, we were talking, I think it was yesterday we were talking about that, is that most of the time when you're a chief, I think Jonah was saying in class, is if you're a chief, you know, your captains don't need you, but you need you as captains. And when you're in a leadership position, you know, that's always where your focus is, like, I need all these people to be able to do and execute this high level of mission. How do I bring them in? You listen. And it really helps with embracing change.
And that's like you say, a perfect case study, because we were handed a 600-page document that, quite frankly, very few of us are going to sit and take the time to read 600 pages when you count in comments and things, the explanations. Nobody's going to read it. And so immediately the fear factor kicks in. Mm-hmm. What are they doing to us? When I took the opportunity to read those 600 pages and then started trying to copy and paste and try to make it look like what our state plan is going to look like, I got really proud and I got pretty happy. Because just like what you said, I found that many things in this proposal we as a state have been doing for years. Incident management system, incident command processes. We've all been teaching ICS and IMS and instituting it for, good Lord, decades. We're fortunate maybe to have that. Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, that's what we do, and we've done that for years now. So there are some painful points, but for the most part, there wasn't a lot of money to it. There was going to be a lot of time to it. But you had to wade through that, whereas, and I don't know, I'm not an expert. I don't know how better you get the American Fire Service to be involved and engaged in something that big. Mm-hmm. But still, the way it was handed off, it was a huge pill to have to swallow.
And I think that's probably a lot of the rub when that comes out. It was just so much to take in that a lot of people didn't understand, so you fear the unknown. And so it took folks like you, okay, breaking it down, and you kind of hit, when you make presentations, you hit a lot of the highlights, so somebody doesn't have to read the whole damn document.
Well, and this goes to Doc here, is that what I found was so much of the confusing or parts that we couldn't do, we weren't prepared to hear the messaging that she gave you on that slide today. It was just our comprehension, our level of understanding wasn't there of the why. And so immediately when somebody tells me I need to do 1582 physicals, all I think of as a fire chief, I'm going to go from a $300 to a $1,500, and probably even that $1,500 isn't going to cover everything that's in 1582. And that just scares the crap out of me. And so what do I do? And the reaction to that is immediately a negative one where I just shut down because I can't do that. Quite frankly, we don't really have the process in state right now to be able to deliver that product. But that kind of thing stops me quickly. Okay, but how can we do that? How do we get closer to that?
So, Sarah, for one, first thing I want to tell you is I thought your presentation today was fabulous. I think you're a great presenter. You're a science geek with a sense of humor, which that works.
Told me mine suck.
Okay, now I'm the M&Ms and
But I imagine that as you go around presenting, there is a lot of resistance because you do kind of poke fun at the science. So do you feel resistance when you go around, or do you feel a lot of buy-in?
I think, well, most of the people that have resistance don't tell me about it, but I can tell, read the room.
Yeah, usually they're walking out. You know.
So I like to call people out as they leave the room.
It's a good move. That's a good move.
Did I offend you with that? So I do think that there's resistance, specifically on the OSHA standard. I have heard a lot of resistance, not aimed at me in particular because they don't want to attack me on that, but I think it does seem overwhelming. And there is a lot of well, what is the purpose? Is this really necessary? And we do have the data that shows it is necessary, particularly if we want to make sure that we keep people who are at that point where they're likely to have a cardiac event on the fire ground off the fire ground. I think that on all fronts, it can really do a lot of good work. I do think that we've not done a great job of saying, here's the path to doing a 1582 if you can't afford it. But I do think it is the resistance of this seems huge, this seems unnecessary. We have the data now to say that it is necessary, but I think, again, we've done a really bad job of poor job of translating science to practice and helping people understand, like, these are the known risks. If we really want to cut back on-duty cardiovascular deaths, then we need to, be careful about who we clear for duty and make sure that they have the resources if they want to stay on the job, those types of things. But, when I say that, everyone hears we want to take people off the truck. But that's not really, the point is not to get rid of firefighters. The point is to help firefighters to be able to live longer, happier lives.
And there's 2 points I think are really important out of what Sarah says. One is we have data that slaps us in the face every year. We love to memorialize when our firefighters die in the line of duty. We do a really good job of that. But then we don't actually look at the data. And I was really fortunate with my brother from another mother, Doug Mitchell, when we wrote 25 to Survive, which was based upon residential line of duty deaths. If we have 100 firefighters die in the line of duty, it's about 6 to 8 who die doing fireground activities. Stretching hose lines, fighting fire. The vast majority are dying from cardiovascular disease or some measure of that. And so why are we not treating them like industrial athletes? And you don't want to get in a situation, I don't want to speculate because it's still fairly new, but a major fire department near where I live had 2 line of duty deaths in a week that were cardiac related. And I'm fairly certain they don't require physicals. So do you want to have that occur where you lose someone that potentially could have found? Because I'll tell you, for my organization, we were able to write a grant, some incredible grant writers, and we did the screening for cancer, the sonogram, ultrasound scanning for cancer. We found cancer, I think, in like 17 people. Wow. It's stage 1, before they even found it in their body, in the hospital, taken care of, not a problem. That's longevity. And for leadership position, you're always looking for opportunities to build trust. And if you can go and say, look, I tell you, my employees are the most important thing to me. Well, do your actions demonstrate that? And if you're able to find ways, money's always a big issue, but if I can find ways to be able to pay for this and then provide that service for our employees, and then you see that benefit is that we stop 17 people from having to get diagnosed at stage 3 or 4 cancer, their career's over, they have to worry about if they're going to live, if they can take care of their family. So it really is like, that fearless leader aspect of you have the ability in a leadership position to see what the outcome will be down the road. And it's not good if you have a line of duty death. So if you could tell someone beforehand, we can prevent it by doing this, why wouldn't we? And now the challenge is upon that leadership position. How do I fund this? How do I do this? And it's difficult. It's very daunting, but it's a necessary job of leadership.
And for me, it's evolution, because evolving into this thing is going to be more palatable, because when this happened to us in the 80s, when this new standard came, it took a decade. Some may have been ahead of us. We're picking on physicals. I don't know. We'll get off that and get on something else, I guess. But it took a while before something like firefighter physicals really became an institutional thing in this state. The standard was there, early 80s, but I don't really remember our department doing much until like 94, 95, somewhere in that neighborhood, okay? Really doing an institutional, a system. And so there was vast improvement. So can this also be an evolution? This happens, this thing gets adopted, this regulation is here. I fully believe that in the state of South Carolina, in some future date, 1582 physicals, or those things, whatever it will be called at that point, are going to just be normal, just like what we do now. It's going to be normal. The question is from a feasibility, in this state, we've got about 17,000 firefighters. Of those individuals, there's probably 6,000 to 7,000 of them are paid career individuals. Everybody else is volunteer, and we have an incredibly diverse, almost disparagingly so, population of volunteers in this state. We've got a lot of haves and have-nots. So now I'm going to look at those have-nots and say, look, you've got to do something today. By golly, there's no evolution to it. Here's the reg, boom. And it's going to put you out of business because you ain't got the money. You just simply, nobody has the money. So what are you supposed to do? And that's the tightrope that we're trying to figure out how to walk.
But I also think that this is a great opportunity, and that's what I really hope the fire service embraces, is that this is an opportunity to say, hey, we know what should be done, right? And in the past, I think fire service has been someone gave me a quote one time I thought was brilliant. You put a room full of fire chiefs, and you put them in a room, and you say, here's a problem. They will come out with 5 solutions. You put a room full of law enforcement officers, the police chiefs, and they will come out with 5 grant applications. And I think it's true. Like, if you look at what they fund on the law enforcement, we have a whole center, Shield Center within our organization that looks at law enforcement. The amount of funds that they put into, like, I just worked with a couple departments that are putting in for peer support. They have an entire grant mechanism just to fund peer support programs. Should the fire service have that? Well, heck yes. Should all firefighters be provided a physical? Yes. Now we have something that we can say, OSHA has said this shall be, and now this is an opportunity to get the funding for it, because this is now our minimal standard, and we have to, and now we have the teeth to put behind that. Where before it's like, well, we think it's a really good idea.
And to me, it's an unfunded mandate. And it's a dirty word, okay? The unfunded mandate side of it. So then, who is responsible for helping provide that funding? Is that the originator of the document? Is that a state level that's really kind of inheriting something that they can't do anything about? Or is it a local entity that, quite frankly, doesn't have a tax base to begin with? They've got pine trees and dirt, and that's about it. So where in that spectrum do you look for those individuals to provide 17,000 people with a service? And I mean, I have a wish, I have a desire, but the practicality of that. And again, I think if you gave it time, your analogy is great, because law enforcement, it wouldn't be a conversation, would it? It would just be, hey, it's got to do it, y'all got to pay for it. Move on, next. It's been done, you got to find the money, boom. Whereas with us, we're out there going, hey, I got volunteer entities that are going to have to have chicken bogs to pay for the doggone physicals.
Not a lot of volunteer police departments, though.
No.
Well, I think it's also an opportunity for a lot of places, and I'll use my own department for example. Like, we have our own wellness center, their own staff of psychologists and mental health professionals. Everything we need is right there. But we do have a robust budget, but all the jurisdictions around us do not, and that's where fire chiefs, leaders, you got to put your ego in your back pocket and go, hey, how can we collaborate? Yes, we have a multi-million-dollar facility, but I just want to be able to pay you some money to let my people come over. I'll pay for the staff, one more staff person, if you can allow us to have access to that facility. And of course, in that spirit of collaboration, yes, sure. Yeah, we can't do it for free because we have to pay a bill, but you don't have to build a brand new facility. You don't have to hire entire staff. We may just ask for some money to be able to offset some of that cost. And then that gives you the avenue, especially in leadership positions, to go back to elected and say, you want to tell the public that you don't want to give money for these people who risk their lives every day? And we already have proven through this model we do that this is beneficial for our people? Good luck.
Well, so one of the, I think, problems with things that are changing or you are working towards, and I think, on the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, kind of deal with this mandate or change in general, is you normally don't see the change when you're involved in it. You're so close to it that it takes maybe 5 years from now to be like, oh, yeah, okay, we used to do it this way, now we changed. And then I think the other caveat to that is that people just resist change because I know it this way, I'm comfortable here, and I don't want to make that transition. So when I first came into fire service, I didn't do a lot of asking why. I didn't have the opportunity to ask why. You were told this is the way we do it, that's the way you do it. Generation just a little bit behind me had a lot of questions on why. And I think that's why your science, not just for the younger guys younger than me, but even the oldest guys in this room, when you're trying to justify it, when you're trying to process it in your mind of why we need to do it, I think your science does a great job of really backing that up, because you hit some things today that were on the screen, and I hope your figures are accurate, because I bought in 100%.
I make them up.
Okay, that was my fear. That was my fear. I'm already bought in. I'm already bought in.
Fine print at the bottom of the screen
values.
you couldn't see.
My eyes ain't as good anymore. I couldn't see the fine print. So I think that's the value of your science and the way you deliver that. As you are presenting this, your section on mental health, how do you feel that's being received from where you're traveling?
Surprisingly well. Like, I'm always surprised at the number of people who will stop me in the hallways and say, like, hey, I really appreciated that conversation or that presentation. And I expect that part to be met with more resistance, and it's often not. But I think partly because we can't, wherever someone's at, like, I've had people say, And people that I love and respect and consider good friends go like, after a couple of drinks, they're like, listen, I don't think this is really that big of a deal. Like, people just need to like toughen up. And I've done it and it's never bothered me. And I'm like, cool. If it doesn't bother you now, and just as long as you know that maybe it will bother you someday, because the data suggests that particularly around retirement, we see people with increased risks for mental health issues because they're no longer going. And I think the few times that I have met it, it has been met with resistance. I think you just have to meet people where they're at. And, I did suggest we have had a lot of cocktails this evening, and, maybe that's not the healthiest way to manage these things. But you can't, I think as long as we're on the mental health topic, we can't push anyone too far, because if someone feels like they're fine, that's fine. If they don't feel like they're fine, that's fine too. If you're fine today, you might not be fine tomorrow. That's fine too. Because we know, right? We know that everything you experience is coded in your mind. Like, your brain keeps it. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, but I think it's similar with the fire service around, and it's a book about trauma and how your body internalizes it. I think what we see with fire service and first responders in general, particularly because of the interrupted sleep and not getting enough REM sleep where you can file things appropriately, I think it just all gets stored kind of a little bit wonky. And so sometimes it comes back. It's also not coming back as, PTSD, the diagnosis was designed post-Vietnam, when we saw vets coming back and they had very specific memories, nightmares, and those types of things. What we see in fire service, it's not one bad call. It's a compilation of all your worst calls. And it's not flashbacks to one thing. It's flashbacks to different things at different times. And I think we just have to talk about it, because I think lots of people experience it, and then they feel like it's abnormal, or they feel like, oh, that's weird. No, it's not. And it's also not normal to not have those. Anything can be normal with mental health when you're dealing with that.
Well, one thing I knew I was going to have an opportunity to be on stage with you tonight, so.
Surprise.
Yeah. So when you mentioned it in your presentation, I knew I wanted to talk about it. So you talked about, and I don't know if you use this term, or I use it when I wrote it down, but the numbing of on duty. The calls that I respond to, the things that I do, the things that don't bother me, yep. Right? So there's a certain level of numbness, and not even realizing that you take it home. And I don't think it was for me as extreme as maybe you gave in your example, but I think that anybody in the audience here probably has a level of that if there's one thing you might want to change when you leave here, is to give that a lot of thought, because I really hadn't thought about that. Am I numb at home? And I think that there always is recovering from maybe a tough call. Maybe it's 6 hours, maybe it's 12 hours, but does that spill into the whole 48, or is it the whole weekend, or whatever? So I thought that was very powerful, and probably something we all need to look at, a little self-reflection.
And the numbing is actually really self-protective, right? Like, if every call you ran on, even if every traumatic call you ran on really like tore you apart, you couldn't do the job. So to be able to file that away, to be able to not have that, like, a friend of mine was telling me the other day, he goes, man, I ran a call, a guy in front of a train, and he said, we had him packaged up and in the ambulance before I realized I knew him. I just went like into autopilot. And I'm like, cool. Like, that's what allows you to do it. If every time you pulled up on a scene, you were like, oh, I can't handle it, that would be a problem. You couldn't do the job. So that's good. You just have to make sure, where's it spilling over? Where is it, are we talking, we've done a really bad job at talking to families, right? About talking to families about kind of like, here's the experience, here's what being in the fire service is like. Here's that sometimes sometimes you're going to want to talk about it, sometimes you're not. You got to figure out for you what works, and you got to figure out how to communicate that to your family. There are some people, I know one guy who said, every time I come home, if I've had a really bad shift, they just have a ping pong paddle at the door. And he said, if I've had a really bad shift and I just need a minute, I just turn the ping pong to red. And then his family knows, he's going to need this time. Granted, I would probably abuse that situation. Every day I'd walk in and I'd be like, red.
Yeah, I need a little.
I'm gonna go take a bath.
Whack me over the head with it, right?
I think that's from Fogo de Chao, when you want more meat, not meat.
Yeah,
And so this is for all of y'all. So you talked about communicating that with the families. So in your mind, what does that look like? How do we pull that off? Is this a meeting at the firehouse with everybody's family? Is this some type of brochure? Is this some type of, I don't know, maybe you want to Zoom or something like that? How does that look like to y'all? How do you reach that to the family?
I'll do a shameless plug, because if I don't, there's a couple people that are just going to be mad at me. Since 2006, we had a pretty big incident in Charleston, 2006, and we began as a result of that incident, and from the tragic loss, we built something that this state has that should be a resource to everybody in this room, and that's the SC FAST team. Our peer support network, our assistant state team that's there, that's paid for by the state, that also pays for you to have clinical support paid for. That system is there. There are some incredibly well-trained individuals that can help you. And to answer your question, my first stop would be to contact Patty Graham and say, look, Patty, I want to do something with my families. Direct me in a position, because she's going to know experts that have maybe already done that or whatnot before. And that, as again, kind of a segue or what have you, that's part of like this OSHA program. Doesn't scare me, because we already got this network. We have a state-funded program that they really know what they're doing. They're great people. So all you've got to do in your particular plan in your station is just reference that, incorporate that, and it's already paid for. It's there. And so from that perspective, I think the state's kind of way far ahead. We've got this. Now, the challenge is what we're talking about. How do you do it? You know, you got to suck it up. Don't be too proud. Don't be too macho, whatever the case may be. You got to do this thing. It's there. But as a recipient of services, I'm proud to say that system is a really good one, and I would encourage anybody to talk to them.
Not every state has that, and it is amazing what you've built here. And Patty's phenomenal. I don't know if she's here, but and I do think the answer to your question is yes, all of the above. Like, we need to start talking in recruit school. We need to have family day, and not just a hey, come and celebrate the fact that they're graduating from academy, but a family day where there's a conversation about what this looks like. You know, if you grew up in the fire service, there are things that when we started doing research in the fire service, the folks I work with didn't have that background. They had a military background, and they'd be like, well, why do they do this? Why do they do that? And I'm like, it's just because that's how we do it. But the thing we have to remember, too, is that when someone joins this job, it's not like they're joining the bank. And I'm picking on bankers. I'm sure they're all lovely people. But they're not someone who got a job, you know, in IT. It's a lifestyle. And when you marry into the fire service, you're part of the family too. You know, I love all the kids that I see running around here. It's amazing. When I used to go on trips, my dad would be like, if you ever get in trouble, stop at the nearest firehouse and ask. Public service announcement though, when you take your kids on vacation, stopping at the firehouse is not a fun activity for them. It is not a tourist destination. Stop making your kids do that when you go on vacation. Every city we went to. But everywhere you are. I know. Oh, I know. But you are part of it. Now, and actually this is interesting, because there's I keep hearing rates of divorce in the fire service are very high. They're actually not. We did a couple studies. We did 32 departments total. I know. I'm shocked too, but the data's the data.
I'm not so sure that I've said the right thing then, because I think I have said
let me tell
the
you.
contrary.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Let me tell you.
I don't know where your stats are. I look out there, I see a bunch of second wives, but go ahead, keep talking.
She said earlier she made up the stat.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
100% of the time it works 100% of the time.
I don't see any
Exactly.
second wives. The lights are too bright. I don't even know who's out there, so I'm just kidding.
Now, there are pockets where rates of divorce are high, but overall, if you ask how many divorces you've had and you standardize that to the general population, rates for men in the fire service are actually lower than the general population for divorce. Isn't that interesting? For women, they're pretty much screwed. Like, they're all getting divorced. But for men, it actually is a lower rate. And I think it's because there is so much of the familyness. And, you know, how many times and I met your wife last night. She was lovely. How many friends does she have with how many of the other are fire wife friends? Well, except that was a horrible example.
Yeah.
I haven't met your wife.
Nice try.
But you know what we see that's really successful in a lot of departments are when you bring the family into it. You know, when the spouses are connected. And so when something's going bad, like they have other people, like we need to have that peer support for the families too.
So that was a great point, and something I wanted to bring up, and it's something that I do and maybe many of y'all do as well. I have always kept my world separate. So I have fire and I have home. And so my wife really doesn't know much that goes on at the firehouse. She doesn't know much about calls. So I just always try to keep it separate. And that's a barrier to bringing those families in, to teach them about things to look for and things to recognize and be prepared for. Yeah, I'm not saying what I did, the way I did it was right, but it's just the way I did it. And it sounds like you kind of did the same.
I mean, I think it's the way you're indoctrinated when you come on the fire service. That's the way I was taught, was like, you separate those two because you shouldn't put that burden on your family. Like, you're here, your family's here, and then when you go home, that family's there. So separate those two. And, you know, Sarah's 100% correct. I saw it over the course of my career, like, one, it's great. The new generation's coming in. They want to engage more in that. They have a deeper intellectual curiosity. They continue to ask, so why would we do that? And I saw it more in the progression of my careers in a couple places. But one is when we do USAR deployments, we're one of the only 2 teams to go international. And so Haiti was a really bad deployment. They were there for a very long time. And our USAR chief, there's a battalion chief who's in charge of that, had done a really good thing, was to start nightly teleconferences with the family to tell them this is where your family is. And when I got to ops chief position, we were in a deployment. I can't remember where we were. It might have been Nepal or somewhere else. And there was no communication. So, I mean, they can't have their cell phones when they're on deployment. So there is no contact for at least 2 weeks. And so a nightly telecon with all the families, with that chief, with the fire chief, with us, they'll say, this is where your husband and wives are, this is what they're doing. And I say the other thing that has really been beneficial is we changed our social media dramatically. We went away from being very closed-minded to be very open and showing everything that our firefighters do, because, you know, the public pays our salary and they should see it. But there's an unintended benefit that came out of that. I mean, in the span of just about, I think it was like 4 months, we went up 800% in our YouTube followers. And that's families. They're seeing what their firefighters are doing every single day. They're seeing their loved ones on these calls going to fires, run car accidents. They're seeing all of that. So just an unintended benefit of having more public-facing exposure also includes the family into it. And to your point, I mean, that's part of recruit school, is the family comes up and spends a family day to see what their loved one has been doing for the last 7, 8 months, Monday through Friday, getting their soul taken from them, getting broken down. They get to come and see that and engage and say, oh, okay, this is everything you do. Because most people don't know what the fire department does, and we're a terrible PR organization. You know, we don't tell everyone everything we do, but the reality is if they call 911, and it doesn't mean you're going to get arrested, who do they send? Us.
Yeah, I always say everything but a bank robbery.
Yeah, so I mean, you're getting the fire departments doing the whole wide swath of that. So the more we educate about what we do, the more we expose more what we do, and the more that we engage that family in that situation of what we do every single day, it's just better, because now you not only have the support network that's in your firehouse, but now you have a support network at home who knows, like, okay, I understand there's going to be an increased burden. It's not like being a banker coming home from a tough day. It's a little different.
Tough day for bankers.
Yeah.
Now we're back to it.
Any bankers here?
This crowd will remember we have a program in January, and so it's a fire improvement conference of which he moderated another panel discussion that was all about social media. And boy, it got kind of lively and hot for a little bit. So they're talking about change. I think what you have just said is probably an accurate change, but there is, on the part of some older people and others that were participating in that conversation, that's change, because it live by the sword, die by the sword. There's been a lot of bad experiences with social media stuff and how you portray. So if you can get a handle on it and get ahead of it early and portray some positive messaging, I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to make some gaffes, there's no doubt. But yeah, even, you know, as a leader, you're always trying to find opportunities to build trust, right? I mean, and social media is the easiest one to do, because there's about 2,000 people in the department I came from. And so 1,500 of them, about 1,500 are in operations. Can I go to all 1,500 as the ops chief and say, hey, great job? But if we have a video of our people fighting fire, and then I can share that across my social media, that's instant gratification. Like, they are being appreciated for what they're doing, even though I can't get down there and go, say, hey, man, you're doing a great job. And so it's great avenues for you to share and expose the great work your people do every single day. It doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time to be able to do it.
You trying to get me wound up on social media and how much I love that.
Game on.
I knew it would fire him up, so there you go.
Yeah, and I don't know that my position will ever change. So,
Good lead in.
yeah. I think there are some organizations that are using social media right. They're promoting the right things. I just think there are other organizations that are taking people's tragedies and putting it on Facebook to gain credibility, to just say in a social proofing kind of scenario here. I got Fairfax putting these cool-ass videos out. Well, is that going to make somebody else put some video out there to try and compete with you that maybe don't have the same parameters or same type of team and willing to take more chances to be cool on video? I just wish that we would do a better job as a fire service on what we're putting out and why we're putting it out. Now, the family things and promotions and
Genuineness.
things you're doing in
genuineness
public, yeah.
of your messaging, the genuineness
Yeah.
of what you're doing.
I mean, the other part of it too is like, whatever. Let's say you go to this fire. Do you want to craft the narrative, or do you want the public to craft the narrative? Because we're going to be filmed no matter what. Because no one's helping you stretch a line. No one's helping you throw a ladder. They want to be the first one to film you and get it online.
Everybody's got a phone.
I'd rather us, and our PIO did a really good job of when you get there to go around to the crowd, like, I saw you taking videos. Do you mind sharing that with me? I'm the PIO. And so we would be able to craft that narrative, not hide anything, but hey, if we suck, guess what? We're not going to hide it. That's long gone. So, we invest into the training of our personnel, and the understanding is everything you do is being filmed, and you should operate that way because there's an enormous amount of public trust that comes with this uniform we wear that you didn't earn. It came long before you ever got here. So we're stewards of that, so be a good steward. And when you are, it gets rewarded, and people see it. And for me, like, we are taking an enormous amount of taxpayers' dollars to pay for this service. You should see what you're getting in return. And why not share it? But you're right.
Well, I guess
if you don't have the ability to craft that right,
when I when I see some posts from different organizations, not just in South Carolina, but all over the place, I follow a lot of fire departments. I just wonder what changed incident priorities, from life safety to get a picture and video, now incident stabilization. Where did that fall in there? Because there's a lot of pictures that I see, and they're cool pictures, don't get me wrong. But I'm like, shouldn't somebody have been stretching a line? Who had time for that shit?
well, I mean, again, you go back to, like, I was on a college tour with one of my sons, and the president of the college was talking about this is the first time ever in history of 5 generations in the workforce. And they go from the silent generation to the current generation that wants to be an influencer. So now you have, hopefully you don't have anyone from the silent generation stretching hose lines. If you do, oh my God, go back to the physicals.
Right.
But I mean, you should, if you're talking about 3 to 4 generations, there is a generation that wants to be a social influencer. And if they're doing that, then again, root cause. That's a lack of leadership. That's a lack of accountability.
Sure.
You're not fixing that behavior because you're going down that rabbit hole where it's more about gratification. I want to be the first one to post this and look at this cool picture. I never really got the whole picture of, like, let me take a picture of all of us in the house of burnt ruins of all everyone's stuff. Like, don't post that.
Yeah.
The people just lost their house. They don't want you looking cool and with your rescue makeup on, for that picture. That's not really what we want to show. We want to show that you had an emergency in your house. We showed up and quickly executed these skills and put the fire out and kept it limited to this.
Well, and, everybody having a cell phone on them at all times, and maybe somebody on scene had a bag phone, but it didn't take pictures. You may sneak a high five, like that was we did a decent job, but you didn't high five on the front lawn when everything they owned burned up,
Yeah.
We just didn't do it. And now I just feel with social media, it's almost accepted that now we're doing it.
We had a magazine, a little paperback magazine that came out around here. I don't know what region it is. I know it came through South Carolina, and that was the front cover. And I mean, if that fire department's here, I love you, but it's just a fact. And the title below it was they caught a good run, a good call, or
Good job.
A good job or something. And I'm like, hell no, if that was my home that was burnt to crap in the background, that's not a good job. You just burnt my crap up, I mean, and maybe I did it to myself.
Yeah, this isn't
but
going to be
still,
popular,
this
Joe.
ain't
but
good.
A good job would have been a sprinkler that put it up before I got there.
I was, as someone who has a lot of pride in this profession, I was offended. I said, that's just incredibly poor choice of words. I get what you're trying to say, but your word choice was awful. And so we shoot, bang, I just shot myself in the foot by showing these people this magazine cover.
Now, I still want to be an aggressive, well, I can't do it right this second because I can't get my mask on, but when I shave this thing back off, I'll be able to get my mask on, and I'm still going to be an aggressive firefighter. I just think you need to stay humble. Ain't no need to flaunt it. Ain't no need to, because today's society, I think, that we have a lot of people identifying as a lot of things. Females, I seen Walmart the other day in Beaufort, there's somebody identifies as a cat, and I don't understand that. But I also think we got a lot of people identifying as firefighters. And they spend more time on social media and posting things out there, identifying as a firefighter instead of putting in the training and being one. Once again, I'll go back to my moderator role.
But
You want to drop your mic or?
No, I'm not going to drop the mic. I just didn't mean to get so goddamn involved.
But here's the thing, though. Like, we're not going to get rid of social media.
No, we're not.
It's like, and I feel like even with AI, we're sitting at a place in history where we're like if you don't embrace it, it's going to be like the people who are like, I don't think the internet's really going to catch on.
No.
I remember the first time someone tried to explain social media, like MySpace, to me, and I'm like, we're already friends. Why would we need to be friends online? What an idiot. Right, that's exactly what I said. So I think that it's one of those things where, like, it's going to be there. So we just have to figure out, like, how do we police it amongst ourselves? How do we have the conversations to say, like, hey, this is not the way to do it? And I do feel like I'm seeing more instances where, I'm seeing either some unsafe practice on the fire ground, or I'm seeing, in particular, I get people all the time, like, what the F, sending me pictures of social media with people fighting fires without masks on at all. And they're like, oh. So I think that we just have to be thoughtful about what we do, but then we have to also police each other on that.
But now I'm coming way back around to this OSHA thing, though, because
Is
now
there a social media policy with us?
Nope.
Oh.
But I'm talking about our image, though, the way we look.
Oh, yeah.
And, okay, so you get these pictures, you get these shots, you get this social media post, and we've been cracked on because some of our people don't really look like, hey, well, how the hell is that person going to be able to do any kind of physical activity? We're on our own worst enemy sometimes. So now back to this OSHA thing, and I'm dragging you back around. So there is a component of this that says not just physical evaluation, but fitness evaluation that you're going to have to accomplish with your fire service, is to make sure that we are physically capable of performing the job, not just 12-lead EKG kind of thing, but I'm talking about, can you lift, pull, tug, jerk, snatch, whatever. And I think we're going to struggle with that, because when we look at a lot of those social media posts, or when people see us, maybe they don't see the elite athlete all the time. Now, okay, God bless you, you're a volunteer, thank you for your service, but at what point do we say, look, maybe you've just got to have an administrative role, because the elite performance that science dictates, as far as your heart rate going up to 192, whatever it was or something, you just simply, you can't do it. And if we don't say something, I'm almost espousing and guaranteeing that you're going to have a heart attack. At some point in this thing, you're going to have a heart attack. And if I don't do something about it as a leader or a chief, I'm just saying, okay, go ahead, I don't care, because you're going to die. Because the chances are, according to numbers, you're going to have a heart attack. You're miserably out of shape. I've seen around this conference a big change. I think that's one of the evolution, because I can remember a time when it was a very sedentary thing, and we all looked pretty bad. Most of those people out there today look pretty good. I mean, I think it is a generational change.
No, you're doing beach workouts before.
Your face, Bruce Klein. I just meant your physique, so that's right.
No, Chief Klein, it's your age. Yeah, it's your age. You're doing fine. Yeah, I think any way to look at this profession other than professional athletes is wrong. But, you put up today's statistics on cardiac or cardiovascular stuff, and we want to address everything except that, as far as physical fitness programs and making sure that we're elite, training hard so that we are prepared. It seems like we want to avoid everything and be like, oh, well, there must be something we're eating.
Well, she said, and I think I'm going to mess this up, so you'll have to get me right.
I said a lot today.
She said, yes, you did, and that's good, that heart rate, that elevation in heart rate wouldn't be expected of a professional athlete, but it's being expected of us. Now, I didn't hear the part where you said just career people. No. You said firefighter, so that's all of us, everybody in this room, because I'm a volunteer firefighter, so that's all of us. We've got to have an expectation of being able to perform at above an elite athlete level. Wow.
And the challenge too with cardiovascular in particular is that, and a guy said this when I very first started research. He goes, "Oh, I get why you're talking about it, because when we hit the fire ground, your risk factors become my risks." So it's kind of one of those deals where, like, if I am not healthy enough to go in and do it, it's not just my choice, right? It means that you're going in, and if I go down, can you get me out? Because then all of a sudden you're also.
But Sarah, I've done this for 30 years, and I've never had a problem.
Yet.
Yeah.
Hey, right, sure, right.
Right.
But that's the mentality. I hadn't had a problem. What's the big deal? Why should I have to do this new thing? Because I've never had a problem.
I mean, I always love sharing this analogy in classes as I'll talk about Usain Bolt. I'm like, this guy trains 7 days a week, changes his entire diet, his workouts are prescriptive, his sleep is to a T. So he can go put on a little skinny outfit and run for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
We'd have firefighters who are asleep, sedentary, resting heart rate. They get woken up with a loud noise, go to their max heart rate, sustain that for about 20 minutes, put about 100 pounds of gear on, go to a superheated environment and go, I can't understand why I had a heart attack.
Yeah.
And, if we treated ourselves the same as an elite athlete, oh, and by the way, Usain Bolt knows when he's going to race. We don't know when we're going to a fire. So now, I was talking about earlier this morning is we're just now delving into the impact of stress and human performance because we just had this mentality that a messiah complex. We are the ones who show up in your worst day of your life. We're good. We got this. You're not immune from stress. And we see it in everything that happens to individuals. I mean, everyone who's ever been to a fire will know, when you hear someone say, I never heard you call me, Chief, auditory exclusion, or maybe they're ignoring you. Or they had tunnel vision. I always share a story about the first fire I went to. I'm crawling down the hallway. I'm 16 years old. Man, I got this. I have my mask on. I'm flowing water. I'm like, woo! And I get a hand on my shoulder. It goes, Shaw, stop. Look to your right. And there's a giant room on fire that I completely passed because I had so much tunnel vision. I was focused on what I was taught in school because the way we train is we train you to do things. We don't train you to think. I was trained to pull 8 pounds of force on a bale and let it eat and hope for positive results. But it was him giving me a tactical reset that, one, made me take a breath, brought my heart rate down, took the blinders off. So we're just now evolving into it. So the work that Sarah's doing and the stuff we see that comes out of UL, these are all these sources of information that we want thinking firefighters. They're all part of this incredible demand upon us. And again, I go back to leadership positions, whether it's a chief or it's the informal leader in a firehouse. That's part of our job is to navigate that and say, hey, here's the priorities, here's the focus we want to do, and we're going to build training around this. Because when you suffer a line of duty death, someone's going to show up and they're going to look and see how the way you train, what you do in your doctrine, what do you do for accountability, and what are you doing for human performance. And if you take a basement fire and say, hey, I have no protocol on how we operate in basement fires, we don't train on basement fires, I don't even really have a good accountability system, and what is the impact of stress on human performance? All 4 of those pillars just fell down. That's why you suffered that line of duty death. That's that root cause that we need to dig deeper into. So it is. I mean, there's a lot of demands, but thankfully we're turning that corner where we're understanding is that we are flawed humans who show up at a very chaotic event, who decided to enter this vocation because we want to do service. Doesn't mean you're immune to all these other things.
So we had a talk in the hallway and talking about line of duty deaths. And what I don't understand, and maybe y'all can enlighten me or have some insight on why we operate this way. We all know that we're trying to get better today than we were, better tomorrow than we were today. But we won't institute change until we have a specific example of somebody who died on a fire ground or died in apparatus. Why does it take that for us to realize we need change? A perfect example in our state is Charleston 9. But you mentioned Brett Tarver, that completely revolutionized RIT. So why do we need that example before we will take action?
I mean, I think most people who are in leadership positions, they are so focused on being reactive leaders and focus inward, they never take the time to be able to look outward and be progressive, right? And see, is my environment changing? Fire behavior is a perfect example. Like UL, I'll give you a lot of credit. When UL first rolled out, what did everyone say? They're scientists, irrelevant. What do?
Sarah.
They went and found credible firefighters to deliver the same exact message. Now everyone kind of follows that. But so, you need these other streams of information to come in from reliable, credible sources because, I hate newsflash, we go to a scientific experiment called a fire, and it's going to act this particular way. And, the reason I think many times we don't do anything until that disaster happens, and I would say that still people don't change until disaster happens to them and they're told to do it, is because, go back to something I said earlier and this morning, is we don't have an unwillingness to train, we don't know how to. And so when you have so many different demands upon you, and you're not really sure as which one's the priority, how I'm going to do it, and you don't have a thoughtful leader who can say, all right, I'm going to prioritize this and say, when I say health and welfare of our people, what does that mean? Okay, I should look at our own history and say, we need to change these things. And if we're doing that, we go back to the cardiovascular. If I know what's killing us, and someone's telling me what's killing me, I probably should do something to stop that. And if it's the fireground stuff, there's a commonality that happens across the board with line of duty deaths. And it's usually the basic fundamental skills that are not executed in a highly chaotic environment. And the wheels start coming off the bus and there's no one who's a change agent that stops it. But when we have a line of duty death, who do we typically blame? The dead guy or girl, or the incident commander who has zero support at the command post. There could be 60 people in the fireground, there's one person in charge with no support. And so it's easy to blame them, and then we just move on. Versus digging into the root cause and saying, what really led to this, and what can I change to fix that?
I also think that they are, they're rare events, and so I think everyone assumes it's not going to happen here. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen to us. There's also kind of a hero mentality that, like, we're superhuman, Like, we're not going to, I would never mess that up. I would never do that. And there's something protective about thinking that way, right? There's something protective about, like, you wouldn't go in a fire if every time you pull up on scene, you're like, so much shit could go wrong here. No, you're going to go in.
This looks bad, get back in.
Right, exactly. Nope, we're going to wait for someone else. But, and you have to have that. You have to assume that you're going to do it right and you're going to do it best and you're going to do it well. And I think it causes kind of like when those incidents happen and you see them, I think then there's also kind of this check on your own mortality, that it's like, wait a minute. And hopefully, like we were talking, there's some departments that don't change after major incidents like that. Departments that have killed the people the same way, which is tragic, because that's like a level of, we're not going to make changes, we're immortal, that is hard to fathom until you're in that moment and facing your own mortality. I think is like that's a big ask of people, that you're also asking to go do really dangerous things.
And I'm going to put somebody on the spot because I think with the lights up, I was looking. I think that's Brad Kavetsky sitting over there. Brad, wave if it's you. Yep, it's him. So I'm going to put him on the spot. So the light bulb went bing when they were talking. You can smell the smoke. Brad, is this an opportunity then for us to take our line of duty death? He's the chairman of our Health and Safety Committee. Is this an opportunity for us to take information that we learn from line of duty, in-state certainly, others probably, and do more institutionalizing, incorporating, and have the association to do more of how do we get those lessons or that information out in a more purposeful fashion, almost like, hey, here's a projected SOP change, or here's a recommendation beyond. I'm not trying to replace what the NIOSH reports are doing in their recommendations, but application, Brad. How do we in our system, in our delivery methodology, in our bureaucracy, how do we institutionalize those things that are in there? Maybe there's another opportunity there to enhance what we're doing or give back a better product, make these things a little more common or less of a reactionary and something a little more proactive. I don't know. Brad, welcome.
Well, I think, and I can't speak for everybody, because I think that some organizations do a great job with it. And they really analyze it and they put together a good program, and there's teaching points in there. But I think that another way that line of duty deaths are handled are, here's a NIOSH report, read it. Yep. And no follow-up, no nothing.
And that's the crux of the issue. It's not a knock to NIOSH by any stretch of the imagination, but I didn't realize this till I was involved in a line of duty death report. But for the entire country, there was 4 people who did the traumatic deaths, and they had to operate in teams of 2. So really you're talking about 2 people. Mm-hmm. And so I was part of a line of duty death report in Frederick, Maryland. The guys who did that report were up in Hartford wrapping up a line of duty death report. The line of duty death happens in Frederick. They come down, they do their interview, they spend a week doing an interview, they have to go back to Hartford to complete the report. 4 days later, Baltimore City has a triple line of duty death. So now they have to close the book on the Hartford one, get down to Baltimore, do their interviews while they have the Frederick one, and they've already filled in the blanks. I mean, that's why you see the top 5 is always the same top 5, because they don't have the bandwidth to be able to dig really, really deep into it. And it's not a fault of theirs because they're providing something,
right,
but it's pretty superficial because if you had a line of duty death and you're in small town America and you have 2 people in a fire truck and you're reeling from losing one of your members, and a federal agency gives you an after-action report and says, to solve this problem, you need 5 on a ladder truck. What am I going to do with that? Who's going to be the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus back there? Because I can't fabricate these people. So it's in a sense, it's almost useless for a lot of people. And I go back to the unwillingness to train versus not knowing how to train. Give me something tangible, a root cause to dig into that I can fix right now because I'm not going to get more than 2.
And you could almost write that down. That's what I meant, Brett, what he said. I mean, how do you institutionalize? He got another thumbs up. Good. So he's got it recorded. So what you said is golden. That's exactly the case.
And that's one of the biggest problems we face. Like, they are useful documents because you learn about the individual, you learn about the incident, but the recommendations are usually so far out beyond what anyone could be able to do is that now I don't even know how to fix this problem because I'm not sure what the root cause of that problem was. And Sarah and I talked about it before. I mean, one of the things we suffer is we don't critically think enough to get to the root cause. And we're okay with just that superficial top layer and say, okay, good, it's topical, let's just move on.
Do you think they're intentionally vague because of litigation?
I think they're intentionally vague because they don't have the ability to dig deep. When we did Frederick's report, it was one of the first reports because myself and Larry Schultz were really passionate about we need to start this entire report talking about the impact of stress on human performance. Talk about the individual, the human that showed up to this fire and lost his life. Then we can dig into all the strategic and tactical factors. And NIOSH, the 2 guys who are doing the investigation, like we've been trying to do that for years, and just before they got disbanded, they had started a new section to deal with that, about the impact of stress and human performance factors. So they were making that turn, but if you only have 4 people to handle the entire country, how deep can you really get?
Well, and so I'd never heard your story before, but I know with Jay, his NIOSH report, same deal. And it's why it took so long to get out, and they had those difficulties because of the number of people that were able to work on it. So it seems to be common.
I mean, I feel like a lot of those guys who are in those positions as investigators, they're almost given like a Mad Libs, like just fill in the blank.
Yeah.
We know what it is. It's going to be command and control. It's going to be accountability. It's going to be communications. Yeah, of course. That's every fire we ever go to, and people don't die.
And that's what drives me insane about this thing, because pick something crazy. If it were the front left tire blowing out on a fire truck, and that was over and over and over and over again, front left tire was going to blow out of a fire truck, you better believe that Michelin Tire would start making this Super Duty left front tire for a fire truck, and we'd all buy it, and we'd put it on there, and it'd be the end of the story. But anything behavioral, forget it. It's the same every time. I mean, we keep reading those damn things, and it's the same thing. And behavioral stuff, we're like, it ain't going to happen to me. But if we can go buy a tire, well, we'll fix that crap tomorrow.
Well, and some of our issue, and I think and you can maybe talk on the science of this, but whenever we are studying NIOSH reports, line of duty deaths, seeing photos from the funeral, we see ourselves holding the casket, not in it. So, what you said, it happens to somebody else. So,
well, I think the other part too, when we get into root cause and the reason we keep repeating it, and I'll go back to this, and probably some people are chagrined and can't believe someone from Fairfax will talk about safe, but we are so arrogant in the way that we think we can reframe words and use them to our benefit. But what's the definition of safe? Free from harm. There is absolutely nothing we do in the American fireground that is free from harm. So then I would ask the question of, like, show me any fire department, show me what your risk assessment model is. What do you teach your people in risk assessment? We don't. Okay, they do one of the riskiest jobs out there when they're called to work, but yet we expect that you're going to operate safe. So, of course, I want a fireground that's free from harm. But if I'm a firefighter and I'm brand new and I'm around you, you got 30 years in the job, I'm going to mirror everything you do, but I don't have the benefit of your experience in the multitude of fires you want to. So the day you take off, I'm like, hey, Proby, follow me. I got 5 months. do what he did. I have no idea what I'm talking about. And this came up when we did the Frederick line of duty death report. Catastrophic collapse. Josh falls in the basement. They sent a couple companies in. On top of that floor, the collapse, because the stress is pretty high. They want to go save one of their own. And I'm talking to one of the truck officers. As I walked through the door, I was sounding the floor. I'm like, what does that mean? I've never been to a class where you're like, that's hickory, that's oak, that might be maple. No, you're checking for the presence of a floor. But why did he repeat that? Because that's what he heard in recruit school. And that's repeated over and over again. And so when we see someone on the roof saying, I'm sounding the roof, what does that mean?
Sounds solid to me.
Yeah, and so the reality is that if we truly want to save fire ground, then we need to teach people prudent risk-taking and what the merits of risk are. And we don't do that enough. So, if I'm looking at a building and there's fire blown out of 5 out of 5 windows, are you going to go through that window? No, because that's not prudent risk-taking because there is no merit to that risk. But if 4 of those windows are showing fire, but one has had a little bit of smoke and that's a bedroom, you're going to naturally say, yes, I will exercise a huge amount of risk for that one window because the merits of risk is I can close that door, search it, potentially find someone and get them out. And that's prudent risk-taking. But if we don't teach that, and that person walks up and says, I was told not to do anything unsafe at the fire ground, we're going to label them a coward because you didn't do anything because it's all unsafe. So if we dig a little deeper and say, if we can educate you about what prudent risk-taking and the merits of risk are, then we're improving the probability we're not going to suffer that line of duty death because we're starting at that base level and giving you a great body of knowledge to evaluate this highly chaotic and dangerous situation and hopefully make a prudent decision.
And I think right there is probably for state of South Carolina the costliest part of this OSHA standard and the biggest thing that's going to have the impact for what we do. I just give you warning up front is that there is a lot of discussion and a lot of content about risk management, risk planning, pre-incident planning. There's very little that I think we're going to have to buy a widget, but I think there's a lot of time that we're all going to have to invest in it because there is a lot of reference to institutionalizing pre-incident plans for specifically target hazards and others, and doing risk assessment and risk management planning as part of your SOPs. So if you want to know what, in my opinion, is going to be the most painful part for the majority of us, it's going to be institutionalizing that and incorporating, truly assessing what your problems are and institutionalizing that into your training and into the operations of your department. I think that's what's going to be the biggest thing for us to handle. We're usually pretty good if you got to go buy a nozzle, which is not in there, but you got a section of hose or maybe even arguably a physical. We're pretty good at being able to say, okay, let's find a way to do that. This one is just about manpower and time, and that's going to be probably, I think, the hardest one to do, but no less important, to your point. I mean, it's got to be done. This is just something that's, we've got to know what we're covering. We've got to know what's in there. But South Carolina is a cotton mill state, has been for years. It closed down, but what it left behind when those cotton mills closed was mill houses. And so for generation after generation of firefighters, our residential fires were in solid legacy material, tongue and groove walls and ceilings, really stuff that was made by craftsmen. And you can go in there and do whatever the heck you want, and it's not going to fall on your head. I mean, you can dance on a roof with 12 guys, and it's not going to fall. I mean, but now what's happening is that's gone. And my soapbox is we're fighting fire in trash technology that is designed to burn, designed to collapse, and designed to hurt us, and we're still using that kind of technology and that training and that approach. We thought we could walk around without protective clothing in those mill houses. Well, now we're going into gasoline cans, and we're not ready for that. We're not thinking that way, and we're not telling that to politicians and builders that, you're building things that are going to kill us and its occupants. And so I think this is going to force people to be a little more practical and realistic with their plans about how do they attack whatever type of call.
Well, even not just the residential, too. I mean, if you look at where the highest number of line-of-duty deaths, multiple line-of-duty deaths at one time, they're not in residential buildings. They're commercial buildings. We know Charleston, we know Worcester. When we have that large loss of life, it's typically in a commercial building, and what did typically the reports say, whether they're internal after-action report or NIOSH, was the application of residential tactics to a commercial building. And that's, do we teach our incident commanders, our company officers, to make that transition? We run a residential building fire every 64 seconds in the United States. We do not run a commercial building fire every 64 seconds. So if I'm doing something every minute of the day in the United States, I'm ingrained in it. I'm going to continue that pattern over and over unless there's some trigger, someone or something that gets me to transition and say, I got to check the plenum. I got to do a roof report. I got to hit the FDC. I'm not going to do a conventional search. I'm going to do a tagline search. But if there's not one person who does it because they're not taught that risk assessment, then we shouldn't be surprised by that outcome.
Brad, I think he's got to be your new best friend. There's another one for you, buddy. And so, institutionalizing, making these, how do we offer these packages to people that say, look, there's a mentality you got to adopt? And we tried training minutes before, but you get where I'm going with it. Brad's going to be your new best friend, right? He's going to be.
Yeah, so another obstacle to change is just.
Bye, Brad.
So your organization, how many firefighters?
Just about 1,500 in operations.
So 1,500, and how many stations we're talking?
40 plus.
So 40 plus stations. Now, there's not many of those fire departments in South Carolina that have that. So for you at Fairfax to make a policy change, to decide that we're going to use a different hose deployment, probably painstaking, probably hard to get all those guys trained up, to learn the policy, and then implement. For most of South Carolina, it's pretty easy. We can probably get it done in a shift. Now, I could see why a big organization like that may be like, I don't know if we want to change because of that little thing. But most of our departments are agile. We can change. So I was kind of curious about y'all making changes, because I know we've talked about some of the changes y'all make, and how do you do it with a large organization? And we can talk about how much easier it is for a smaller one.
Yeah, I mean, patience is key, right? I mean, it is a much larger animal. It's turning an aircraft carrier around in a bathtub. So it takes a minute to do it. But all the changes we have implemented that have been something that impacted the people in the rank and file has germinated from that lowest level and come up. Like a hose line deployment. As an ops chief, yes, I spent my career on engine companies. I love engine ops. But I'm not going to implement a new hose change. I want to hear it from the people who are pulling it. So that comes up. I'm going to task you to do the work, to figure out everything that leads up to that, how we're going to train, where the money comes from, logistically, how we're going to implement this. Okay, then let's do it. And we made a lot of changes. I mean, we changed our firefighting nozzle. We changed our hose packages. We changed our high-rise packs. We changed the way we spec'd our apparatus based upon the data that we got from the working fires we want to. So it took a little bit of time, but typically it never came from my level. And if it did come from my level, usually it's the ops chiefs, the deputy chiefs, and myself to say, hey, we're seeing a trend. I want you to go back and talk to captains and lieutenants and figure out, is this real? Like, what do they experience in the firehouses? And let's reverse engineer it. So it was important to me that typically most of the things we ever changed, while they took a little bit longer, they came from the people who were doing it every single day, and it wasn't arbitrary. Because there's nothing that crushes morale more than that when you just change for the sake of changing. Because people are investing, I mean, I truly believe is that most people show up because they love this job and they're performing acts of commission. And if you walk in and just change because you want to change, that's demoralizing. But if you change because they want to do that, again, trust. They're building just little incrementally more and more trust in their leadership. And then when you need to cash in on some of that leadership capital, when you have to change something that might be unpopular, trust I'm doing this for the right reason.
The mood's a little down, so I'm gonna need Sarah to bring it up a little bit. And I just want to talk a little bit about I just want to talk a little bit about suicides. And I mention it because I believe in social proofing. And I think that one of the things that I would like to come up with next year is a class on social proofing and how it all works. But it's a lot in the civilian world, social proofing as it regards to suicide. Is there been any studies, are you aware of any studies that when there's a firefighter suicide, is there an increase nationwide, statewide, in follow-ups?
No, there's no research yet.
No research?
I like that answer.
Question. No, it is.
He's going to do it out there.
I know. I've got a job for
Brad,
you.
you got a job.
So there is literature that in the general population that suicides are sticky, and it's one of the things that we worry about in the fire service. It's one of the things that what you'll see in high schools in particular is that when you have one suicide, often you'll have kind of a cluster of them, because for a number of reasons. One, it brings that up as an option. And then two, there's suicide kind of, after suicide, particularly if you think about like in a high school, everyone's like, oh, he was the best guy, even if we were all assholes to him yesterday and no one liked him. And so it does, we don't have great data on it in the fire service because we don't track suicides in the fire service nationally. Jeff Dill does. If you know Jeff Dill and you know of a department that's had suicide, you can get the information to him. We don't track it nationally. I do happen to know of 2 departments in Kansas City that had that happen, where they had 2 suicides within a short period of time. Actually 3, now that I say that out loud. So I do think that we probably will see, as we start tracking suicides, a similar phenomenon. I think there's also likely, I have some concerns about like the public safety officer benefits now including suicide.
Good for you, because that's another hot button topic we've talked about. So good for you for pushing that button. I didn't have to. Go for it.
I'll leave that alone for now.
Oh, no, you won't.
You're the one who was like, let's talk about something
No, I do.
more exciting.
I didn't want to interrupt you, really. Because I know there are studies out there that not only that there's an increase in follow-up suicides, but there's also an increase in single-vehicle, single-occupant accidents.
Which is another challenge when we say we don't track suicides in the fire service. We track, what Jeff Dill tracks is ones that are known suicides. And when you look at like death certificates, particularly with fire service, what's reported on a death certificate is often, a vehicle accident rather than a single vehicle accident where a car runs into a tree type of situation. So I think that there's a lot that we don't know. And I think it's probably more of an issue than we think it is. The ones that I know about were very obvious, but I do think that it's probably an issue. And if you do look at Jeff's data, your department's more likely to experience a suicide than an on-duty death. So we do know that it's more common than the cardiovascular events or the falling through a floor or those types of things.
And I guess where my mind was tracking when I was thinking about it and you were talking about it today was, is there merit of some type of, not necessarily a procedure or something that we heighten our sense?
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that ripple effect, if it happens in Jacksonville, how far does that ripple go?
Yeah.
And is there something that we need to be looking out for? Is there a guy that's at a department or person at a department that is already struggling? This news comes out, it's national news. Let's keep an eye on whoever.
Well, what we would hope for is that is the standard. So we know that peer support works, right? We know that if you look at and this is why we need to get families involved, because we know we've got the firefighter, and that's the first circle, but right outside the firefighter is their crew and their family. That's the people that see them on the daily basis. And then beyond that, you've got your peer support team. You've got all the other people within the organization. I mean, as it grows out, yeah, we want to get some people professional help, but that's pretty far out. Like the people that are going to be your immediate people. And most suicides happen, and I can't remember the number exactly, but
Make it up.
42% of suicides. No, it actually is almost, I think his number was almost half. I just heard Thomas Joyner, who's an expert on this, present, and I think almost half of suicides that occur, the decision's made, and the attempt is done within 10 minutes. So it's pretty quick. So what we need to be doing is we need to be talking about making sure that we've got peer support, helping people monitor each other, helping them, like, hey, you're kind of being an asshole. You usually are so nice. Or more of an asshole than usual, Dan. But we've got to start helping people to be aware of those types of things, but we also need to be just talking in general about like safety planning. Everyone in the fire service should have a card in their pocket or a note in their phone about the reasons that they have that really drive them to live every day. And if you ever struggle with that, you need to be able to have that. If you have a firearm and you think that there is a risk that you are struggling at all, you need to have pictures of whoever motivates you to stay alive sitting in the case with that firearm. And those are some of the things that we just need to be talking. It wasn't actually my idea. It came from some other researchers. But some of the stuff like that, especially because a lot of those things are made in kind of that split second, I am just feeling overwhelmed in this moment situation. We just have to be, we gotta normalize those conversations. We gotta normalize doing things like that. And then we also need to start training folks, not just in the peer approach, but in the idea that everyone's a peer. Everyone in the fire service should have some sort of training on if you think one of your colleagues or friends in the fire service or outside, but if one of them you think is at risk, how to have that conversation with them. And it's not how to be their therapist. It's how to say, I'm really concerned about you. You said some stuff that's bothered me. Are you considering harming yourself? And asking it straight on. It's an awkward conversation. I've had it more than once, and it's really awkward. But you got to do it if there's any question. And then sometimes there's nothing to say. You know, Frank Lito tells a story about he walked in counseling services unit and saw this guy that had been struggling for a long time. He's reading this huge book, and he's like the first chapter in. And he said, I remember talking to him, saying he was there for counseling, and he said, I remember thinking he sees a future. You know, he's got this whole book that he's getting through. 2 days later, he gets a phone call, and the firefighter was dead. And when his therapist was talking to Frank, he said, you know, I didn't see it. And Frank said that the response I gave her, and I think one thing to remember is that sometimes there's nothing to see. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes there's nothing to see. But in other instances, there are. So are we ready to have that conversation if it needs to be had?
Your time is drawing near. May I ask a question, Mr. Moderator?
Absolutely.
There are people out here who are going to want to hear more from both of you. I know you're teaching a class tomorrow, or you
I already taught.
You're right, but I know
It was
you were
amazing,
done.
right?
Right. I heard that. No, okay, but they can find you somewhere. So let's share a little bit about. They can come to class. Where can they get more from you? They can find you on the web and that kind of thing.
Well, thank God I have sons who are 20 and 18. They're like, Dad, you need a website. So it's just chiefdanshaw.com. Makes it really easy. Super easy to come and find me and contact me and enjoy the conversation, enjoy the engagement. I mean, one of the things I loved, and Sarah and I talked about this, is like, if I learned anything in my career, the most important thing you can do is develop relationships and to have relationships, whether it is in the most troubling of times when you feel like you're having mental health crisis, or just to, hey man, we had a conversation and you want to call me, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and I can give you some ideas, or vice versa, or we can just talk shop. Because, and I would, not to sidebar off anything, but one of the things we really, really suck at, we spend about $120,000 to about $140,000 to onboard you. How much do we spend to help you with the transition out of your career? And that's really difficult. And near and dear to me, Bill Gustin was a dear friend of mine, and none of us saw that coming with Bill. And so, when that can happen, it's really important to build that network and that connection, because all too often firefighters confuse purpose with goals. And your purpose is not to be a great firefighter, because when you retire, you're no longer a firefighter. Your goal is, backwards. Your goal is to be a great firefighter. Really, it's your purpose. Your purpose is to serve. And even though you take away the title of firefighter from me, I can still serve. I can go volunteer. I can go do this. I can still find a measure of service, but we don't do enough to bridge that. So hit me up anytime.
Hit me up.
And so Science to the Station, we have social media now. We also have within the membership thing, I put it up today, but I think you can click on the link to sign up and just put Sarah as your code.
I didn't put my Sarah code in, but I've already done it. It worked.
Good job.
It worked.
Well, we're starting to do some beyond social media, because I'm actually not good at social media. We're starting to do some for the members section. We're doing like webinars where it's interactive. Like we're getting ready to do one called Frankly Speaking, and it's Frank Lito, Frank Lieb, and me. So from FTNY, isn't that cute? I'm going to wear a shirt that says, let me be frank. But they're both amazing. But so we're doing some engagement like that, and then we have the conference in Loveland in November that's going to be awesome. I'm in charge of planning the party.
We're,
Real quick, you can't see out here, but as the program is going on, you had a big crowd here at one point. They're all kind of shifting to the soft opening and free food and stuff like that.
Oh, then I'm going to.
Well, you said what?
Bye.
I got to tell you, I judge presentations on how many notes I took. I got 5 pages. There were several aha moments in here, and hopefully a lot of you guys have those aha moments and things that you're going to be going back and thinking about. So great job. Very, very
Awesome. Thank you.
well, thank you, sir. I think we'll end on that. Thank you all for coming. Great time, great talk. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And I will see all of y'all
In the big room.
in the big room. Me and Joe are going to be doing part 2.
Thank you.